that ask students to write or use processes that involve writing. We just kind of discussed that, and we saw how across the board there are several. Even if it's not in the writing section, in the reading section, it's still asking for students to write. So how can we improve our students' writing skills and prepare them for the Common Core? Well, I have the answer, and that is writing across the curriculum. And writing across the curriculum is something that's been around for years. Some people don't agree with it. What we're going to talk about, because a lot of it is fear. There are fears that come about with it, and we'll talk about those. But in case you don't know what writing across the curriculum is, it basically has two main goals. And the first is learning to write, so working on writing skills, and writing to learn. So using writing to learn new material. Those are the two main things that they believe writing across the curriculum does in all disciplines. So not just in English class, but in every class that we are getting our students to write. By writing more often, of course, they're practicing that skill, just like playing any sport, just like playing an instrument. Anytime you're trying to learn to do something and improve it, you need to do it often. So if they're only getting it in my classroom, it's not enough. They need to have it in every classroom. But the other thing with writing is that it also provides them with a tool in order to learn new information. It's a great tool for learning.
So by learning, right, or writing to learn, you mean just like writing things down to process new information?
Right, yeah, exactly. Processing new information, showing what they understand, maybe even just writing a question is writing, and it shows what they still need to know. So benefits, that's actually a benefit of writing across the curriculum, is it provides students with writing practice, because again, they need practice as often as possible. It's a great learning tool for students. It works on students' critical thinking skills, so it helps them to have to actually think through things, helps them to analyze information, evaluate those higher order thinking skills that we are always talking about. They can do it in writing. And it shows students learning their thought processes and misunderstandings. So that's a nice thing as far as a teacher, is by having our students write, not only can we see what they've learned, but we can see how they've thought this, through, and we can see what they still don't understand. Sometimes we don't know. Sometimes we have those students who aren't willing to raise their hand and ask a question. I had a class like that today, actually, who just kind of said, I didn't get it, so I didn't really do it. I try to, pry them to, ask questions, ask. So try to pry information from them. But sometimes you have those students who don't feel comfortable doing it. So having them write is a good way to find out if they actually got it or not. So as I said, there's always some fears that come about with writing across the curriculum. And one fear that comes from teachers, and it's usually those non-English teachers, they have the fears because they think writing, I don't know how to teach writing. I can write a little bit, but I don't know how to teach it. And I've actually had teachers say that. I don't know where to even begin. I wasn't taught how to teach writing. So lack of expertise is one fear.
Amy, how would you grade that if you're a history teacher and you have them write an essay in history? Do you grade them on the writing content plus the what they're supposed to have in it? How do you combine those two? What are you looking for?
As far as, and that's one thing I'm actually going to talk about, but
Okay.
I'll go ahead and talk about it now. As far as grading goes, you kind of want to decide when you're planning this activity, what is the whole point of it? Dana and I and Liz are going to work on probably focusing on the grammar, and we're going to look at punctuation, capitalization, and spelling, and those things, because that's what we are teaching them. We want them to get that across. But that's not necessarily all that we're going to look for either. As far as in other classes, it just kind of depends on what the teacher's wanting. Especially with that being a fear as far as lack of expertise, if your goal was for your students to know the difference between an animal and plant cell, you are probably going to look more at the content as opposed to how well did they use commas, how many misspellings were in their paper. So it's basically kind of deciding, what am I grading? If you decide to grade all of it, then it can become, very tedious and get stressful on somebody. So actually, that's a recommendation I would make, is not to do that. Okay. So then another fear is because of assignments being tedious, or the fear that you have to teach writing with writing across the curriculum. people are afraid it's going to take time away from their own content area. They're afraid that I'm not going to be able to teach this because I'm going to have to stop and teach about semicolons. But that's not the case. That's not what we're talking about when we talk about writing across the curriculum.
Let's go back to the grading.
Okay.
In my classroom, yeah, I would not grade them on like paragraph content or what I'm looking for in an essay. Then they simply won't give me an essay, they'll just jot down answers. So if I'm in the curriculum like biology, then when I'm assigning a writing assignment, if they're only grading on biology, then I'm not going to get that writing style that you want without grading them on that also.
What?
And that's the special ed version, because my kids do as little as possible. That's one of the reasons why they're in there. And
It's
I
not
think,
special
you
ed.
know, but it's,
They're all gonna do as little as possible if
Yeah.
you tell them all.
Yeah, that's not just
yeah.
peculiar to you.
So what I've done a little bit of this, and basically you can grade them on the content, because that's like the main point of the assignment, but also give them maybe a 7th grade. Did you follow instructions? Did you write it in paragraph form? Did you
And you
use
don't-
complete sentences?
And you
or-
don't have to check every period, every comma or whatever. I'm taking this because Mr. Gowen came to me a couple days ago. He's having them write their 2-page research paper on a famous Missourian. And he said, Taylor, what do you want? And I said, I want MLA, they need da 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 da. And he says, how do I do it? He's scared. How do I do it? And I said, show me what you've given them before. And he showed that to me, and I jotted notes down. I said, okay, put this on your rubric when you hand it out. So I am actually giving them time in my class to where we go to the library. I'm working on formatting, I'm working on the commas, whatever. And they're doing the research. He's letting them work in his class on the deep research about the person and the content. So between the two of us, we're tackling this beast. And I'm saying that he's more receptive to doing more like this because he knows. So when it comes down, those papers are turned in and graded. He's gonna grade them on content. I'm gonna glance over them as far as giving them a score, and the two shall be combined. So I think that's a pretty good marriage.
Well, this was what I did with my last essay. And it was just a free write. Where would you go if you were going on vacation? Give the location, what you would do, and why you picked that place. So that would be a 5-paragraph essay. Opening, and then the 3 paragraphs, and then closing. And I told them that. I told them they had to have 4 to 5 sentences per paragraph, which was minimum. And so then they wrote it. And then I had them go back and edit their own. And I had one student, well, how do I know how to spell words when I don't know how to spell words? So I helped them through that. And then I had them recopy it. I had one student give it back to me with a worse second copy than I had on the first copy. It was horrible.
You just, in my opinion, you just decide what's your focus. Is it the content?
I took off for spelling, I took off for commas, I took off for
Yeah.
lack of an apostrophe and don't. I got that particular because I'd already taught contractions this year.
And when I've done.
And I shouldn't have to do that as a high school level, anyway.
Yeah, well,
Yeah, you should.
I feel the same way, but there's often times where I have to do the same thing. I just had my sophomores write a letter, and there's 3 things I'm grading them on. And first, it's a letter. They had to read a short story, and they have to write a letter as though they're the author writing to her publisher, as far as the theme of the short story. So I'm grading them on the format. I'm grading them on the fact that they've talked about the theme that they have in the letter, what they're supposed to have. And I'm grading them on their use of commas and semicolons because we just practiced that. And I told them, I said, it doesn't mean you have to use those items, but if you use them, I want to see that you're using them correctly. And so it's just those 3 things. You know, I'm not looking at spelling this time. I'm not looking at those items, just because my main focus really of all of it is to look at their writing and answering theme, because with the end of course test coming up, I know those things could definitely be hit. You know, so that's, but I have been guilty in the past. I have had times where I've done that. But I also feel when they're getting to be older that we should have to look at those things, especially with seniors and juniors, because if they go on to college, you know, everything is going to be looked at.
I've had junior high do like writing assignments, like doing a critique of an artwork. And I just tell them paragraphs for each section. They have to have, you know, 4 different parts of description, analysis, and judgment, and then it's an opinion. And I just tell them that they have to write complete sentences, and they have to have 3 to 5 sentences, but they'll say, are you grading spelling? And I tell them, no, because I'm afraid if they get so wrapped up in spelling, that they're not gonna put descriptive words down, they're gonna leave out things that I really want them to focus on what is going on here. Tell me what's in this picture, tell me how it relates to the elements of art. I don't care if you can't spell composition, because I'm more concerned about
Right,
content.
right.
But I'm like, you know, you said, if you just give them, say, you know, do this, and you don't give them some guidelines, then I'll give things like, what's in this picture? A tree, a flower, a house, and I want to say, I see a house on the left-hand side of the painting, you know, that, I want to be more specific. So you have to tell them complete sentences.
Yeah, I think that's something we're finding just with the last in-service when we talked about them basically doing the minimal amount and not following directions. Like, we have to be specific as far as it needs to be written out. Because they're always looking for the easiest way out to get done. They just want to be done.
But the end of course test on that essay is not going to give specific things. You have to use complete sentences.
Right.
So I emphasize this is what it should look like at the end of course test essay. That's what we're working on. So they know it's, and I only give them the bare minimum, and then I grade them on everything.
We've been working on the same thing just because I don't know what it's going to be like as far as the writing. And I just looked up in 2008 their scoring guide and how they scored as far as to get the 4 points. And so my students did a letter and then they went through and evaluated, am I hitting these things? Which some of them still, I mean, it's kind of above them as far as I don't know if they don't know if they're hitting it or not exactly. But we're just trying our best. Luckily for us, I guess it's only 4 points, whereas his performance event is a lot more, but still. But I tell them, I'm like, that could push you up a level, it could drop you a level. So we'll just kind of see how it goes. But
I think in the end, it just depends on what's your purpose of the assignment.
Yeah.
yeah,
If your purpose for it sounded like your essay was to get them ready for that
Yes.
English and the course test, so I think what you were doing was fine.
And I wanted them to edit it
Right.
themselves,
And they
so that they could get the feel of it and to rewrite it, because they hate that.
they
The
do.
kids hate that.
My students do too. They just want, what if my copy's perfect? The first one's perfect. It's not. But I get that all the time. What if it's perfect? Yeah, I mean, like, my copies are never perfect the first time. So
That would be wonderful.
yeah. So along with that, as far as fears, of course, a fear is always more grading. People don't want to have more grading. And then just the evaluation process, kind of how we've been talking about. They're always kind of afraid on how do I do that? What should I look at? So some solutions to these fears is don't focus on grammar. If your main primary goal, of course, is content, then just look at the content. Don't worry about how well they wrote it. Don't worry about spelling. Don't worry about comma usage. Just look at the content. Write along with your students. This is always really good because not only does it model to your students exactly what you want, but it also shows them that we are not perfect when it comes to writing and that we need to go through that process and we make mistakes and have to go back and fix it. And while we're doing that, it's also working on our own writing skills. So it's kind of, for those who might not feel very confident as far as teaching writing, it's a way to work on that skill. Collaborate with teachers, which Dana said she's done with Mr. Goen. I know Josh and I have done it in the past with the ecosystem project. His students would research an ecosystem and make a PowerPoint, right? And then for me, they would write a research paper. And so we would work together and he would help me as far as going through the content, but I was looking more at the format of the paper to make sure they were following proper MLA style. Stagger big writing assignments, and this is something I've had to learn on my own as a teacher. I used to want to give all of my classes, for some reason, I don't know why, but I would always give them a writing assignment at the same time, and I realized it's a lot of reading to do, grading of writing assignments, so try to just stagger them, so not all of your classes are writing at the same time. And small writing assignments can be just as beneficial as big ones. You know, it doesn't always have to be a huge research paper. It could just be something like a 2-sentence response out before they leave class, just to get an idea of what they've learned and as well just giving them practice. Evaluate only 1 to 2 elements of writing, or focus on what exactly you want to get from that, and that will help you as far as your evaluation process. And of course, You don't have to grade everything, and I know if we're teachers who have been teaching for a while, we know that, but sometimes you get new teachers in. I remember I used to think I had to grade every single thing, and I was grading all the time, but you don't have to. Just giving them practice is beneficial. Or if you feel like they need a grade, just give them a completion grade for trying.